Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. This is episode 36 of the Feeling Good podcast, and today will be another of our Ask David podcasts. And David, I wanted to bring up one comment that was entered by one of your blog readers. This was a comment in a blog post that you titled Error Number 4, Reverse Relationship Hypnosis, and where you were writing about how people see themselves as the victim. And Rosie comments by saying, respectfully, I think it's important to include a disclaimer when discussing this topic, that it does not apply to truly abusive relationships. Encouraging a victim of abuse to examine their own culpability is unethical and dangerous. And I think that this will resonate with a number of people, probably, especially people who work with victims of domestic violence and such.
Yeah.
So what would you say to this reader?
Well, this comment made me kind of anxious for a number of reasons. It is very politically sensitive, for sure. Yes. And you certainly never want to go from other blame to self-blame.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, well, it's his fault, to say then it's my fault. In my book, Feeling Good Together, I have a chart that contrasts blame versus taking personal responsibility.
Oh.
And I think when you're in a genuinely abusive relationship, it becomes 10 times more important to look at the way you're communicating with the other person, because you may be communicating in a way that reinforces their abusive behavior. Again, I'm hesitant to make this case because it's so easy to misinterpret what someone is saying and take it in a way that isn't intended. But I have four.
But you're not saying that the person's behavior causes the abuse.
Well, it actually can. It actually can trigger the other person's abusive behavior. And I can give you quite a few examples of that and how it changed in the way you're interacting with the other person can set you free from the abuse. And I might say that the goal in using the 5 secrets of effective communication with someone who is abusive is not necessarily to develop an intimate relationship with that person because they may be genuinely dangerous, but rather to interact with them in a way that they will stop targeting you as the victim of their abuse. So I hope this works. I have some trepidation, but I also think it's an exciting and an important topic. Let me start out with an example of how not to do it and how to do it. And I'll try to publish the 5 secrets of effective communication again in the show notes so people can see how these techniques work. When I was teaching at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School and supervising psychiatric residents, I would teach them how to do the 5 secrets of effective communication. And one of the residents was particularly unskilled in empathizing with others, and he got incredibly excited about the 5 secrets And he was practically an evangelist for them. In fact, he wanted to stand in front of the University of Pennsylvania Hospital and hand out the list of the 5 secrets to people on the sidewalk because he thought this could really maybe change the world. But he gave an interesting story. One night he was at the VA hospital on call, and I worked there too. We had a depression research unit. And he got a call, an emergency call. He had several medical students with him, following him around, and as part of their training to learn how a psychiatrist works. And so he got a call from the schizophrenia unit that one of the patients had become violent and explosive, and to come up right away because it was a dangerous situation. They'd be unable to contain this patient. And so he rushed up to the 7th floor with them on the elevator with the medical students. They went into the day treatment unit, and this 6'7", 285-pound muscular fellow was standing, shaking his arms and screaming profanities at the top of his lungs and threatening people. And so he said to the fellow, what is it that you're upset about? And the man started screaming that my psychiatrist said that she was going to meet with me every day, and she didn't meet with me today, and I found out she's out of town, and blah, 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 like that. Yeah. And I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do something here. Yeah. And the medical students got all excited. And they tried what is a common error of people in these situations to argue with him or to contain him or to persuade him. And they said, listen, Mike, we know you're a psychiatrist. She's a good woman. She had to go to Washington, D.C. today to go to a conference and
they tried to reason with him.
Try to reason with him, and she'll be back tomorrow, and I'm sure she'll have a session with you and, explain what happened. And at this point, he really exploded because, again, you see, they're arguing with him.
They're not listening to him.
Yeah, they're not listening, exactly. So he picked up a wooden chair, and he was standing next to this glass bookcases and smashed the chair against the bookcases, and glass went splattering all over the room, and the chair shattered. Now he's got the 2 legs of the chair like clubs.
Weapons,
Yeah, weapons. And then the resident said to the medical students, hold on, I want to show you a little different approach here.
Yeah.
And then he started using the 5 secrets: disarming, stroking, feeling empathy, thought empathy, I feel statements, that type of thing.
And you were not present.
I was not present. No, this was just something he reported to me at the next seminar, our weekly training seminar. So he said to the fellow, listen, I'm on your side here. That's happened to me sometimes when people let me down, who I really, really cared about. And you've got every right to be angry. And if she told you she was going to meet with you and she didn't tell you she was going out of town, then absolutely you've got every right to be feeling the way you do. And he suddenly was like stunned when the resident said that, and he said in a kind of meek voice, "You do? You agree with me?" And the resident said, "Oh, absolutely. I see exactly what you're saying. You're absolutely right." And the fellow said, "Well, gosh, if you feel that way about it, let's sit down. We can kind of talk this out." And the fellow just sat down. He was sweet as can be, and his anger suddenly disappeared. But you see, it's the opposite of what our intuition says, and what people say. Oh, you're supposed to use assertiveness training or something like that, and stick up for yourself. And while in the 5 secrets, it's EAR: empathy, assertiveness, and respect.
Yeah.
It's crucial to show respect for the other person and to see the truth and what they're trying to say, because you ask yourself, why do people get violent? Why do they explode? Well, the main reason is because nobody's listening. Do you see? And so this is a very different way of looking at a violent situation. But using these tools can save your life. And speaking of that,
well, in this particular case, one can say, well, all right, this is the first time that this patient had been addressed this way, and that he had been really heard, and that someone had taken his side. So you could say, well, he was stunned, and that kind of like stopped him in his tracks. What if this had been somebody who's more commonly violent? And
well, that brings us to our next example.
Okay, all right. So
a woman attended my relationship workshop that I was doing for a couple of years around the country called "And It's All Your Fault," which is on how we tend to blame others for our problems. And she learned the 5 secrets, and then but I didn't know she was there. I mean, there were 100, 200 people there in the workshop, and then she happened to appear in the same workshop a year later, and came up and said, I went to your workshop a year ago, and I wanted to tell you what happened to me after the workshop.
Huh.
And I said, yeah, I'd love to know. And she said, well, I really concentrated on learning the 5 secrets of effective communication. And then I went home. I think she lived somewhere in the South, Georgia, South Carolina, something, in a small town. And she said that there had been a serial rapist in her town, and his modus operandi was to sneak into the home of a single woman and wait for her to come home. He would break in, and he would have a gun. And then he would grab her, put the gun in her ribs, take her to his car, and drive to her, the bank where she has her instant money card, and force her to take all of the money, as much as she was permitted to take out. And then he would take them into the woods and beat them and rape them. And each woman, he was doing this about once a week, and the police were pointing out that each woman, he'd done 6 or 8 of them in, about a 2-month time. Each woman was getting beaten worse than the one before. And the one, the last one that he did was now in an intensive care unit in a coma.
Uh-huh.
And the police said the next one he rapes, he's probably going to murder her. And so, of course, they were telling people to be careful and all of this type of thing. And she said she came home from work one night and walked into her apartment, and there was this fellow with a gun, and she knew instantly who it was.
Yeah.
And she said, I've got to remember what Dr. Burns is teaching me with the 5 secrets of effective communication. And so he put the gun in her ribs and said, shut up, we're going to go out to my car. And then she was telling herself, I've got to treat him with respect. I've got to see the world through his eyes. I've got to form some kind of human connection. And so as they were walking past her neighbor, she said to him, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I don't know if you like flowers, but my neighbor, Mrs. Green, you can just take a glance down and see the beautiful flowers that she has here. And he's like, shut up, I don't care about flowers, we're getting in the car. And then she got in the car, and they're driving, and he says, take me to your bank, to your instant cash machine. And she started saying, I want you to know that I'm really frightened right now. That would be an I feel statement.
Yeah, I feel, yes.
And I know who you are, and you're the serial rapist, and I believe you're going to kill me now, and then rape me and kill me. And I want you to know that I love life, and I feel, frightened and scared. At the same time, I'm trying to look at the world through your eyes, and I can imagine for you this is unbelievably exciting right now, like when a cat catches a mouse and then plays with it before it kills it. And I can imagine that the excitement is so intense that it's virtually impossible for you to resist it. And so I want you to know I'm not judging you or blaming you. At the same time, I wonder what it's like for you afterwards. Like, you get sad, you get lonely. I mean, once you've had your orgasm, you come and you beat the person, or in my case, you're going to kill me. And then what does that feel like? And I wonder if life must be kind of lonely for you, because you can't tell anyone about this. You have to keep it a secret. And I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but I just wondering if you're really close to anyone, or if you have any friends, or, what your life is like. And to tell you the truth, my heart kind of goes out to you. Now, notice that what she's doing is she's trying to be other-centered and not to blame him, not to judge him, to actually provide emotional support for him. And she said she looked at him, he seemed to have a tear in his eye, and they pulled up to a red light, and there happened to be a police car right next door to park, waiting also at the red light. And he turned to her and said, there's a police car right there. I think you need to get out of the car right now and tell that policeman who I am. Mm. So she stepped out and knocked on the window and said, this is the serial rapist here. He just kidnapped me. Yeah. And the policeman went over, and the fellow came out, put his hands up meekly, and was arrested. So again, it was an example of doing the non-intuitive thing, and I can't imagine someone more cruel or exploitative than a serial rapist, and yet she was showing compassion, and when she did that, it actually took the fun out of it for him, because she wasn't in this role of a screaming, pleading victim.
And it sounds to me like he also began to see her as a human being, not an object.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But when violence is occurring, people are seeing each other as objects. The Jewish theologian Martin Buber wrote about this. He was an early 20th century.
I-thou,
the I-it relationship versus the I-thou relationship. And so she brought this fellow into an I-thou relationship. Now I can give you yet another example.
Keep going. This is quite amazing.
This is a personal one, because I believe, you have to practice what you preach. If you just teach things and don't use them in your own life, then you're kind of what's called a phony, I think. But right. We all struggle with these things, therapists and patients alike. And I become a cat person, but I wasn't always a cat person. I used to be a dog person, and for one of my birthdays when we were in Philadelphia, my wife gave me this Samoyed dog we named Salty, a white Samoyed, and I just loved him. I'd always loved Samoyeds because a friend of mine in medical school had one, and
there's those big white fluffy dogs.
Yeah, and they're just so sweet, and I just loved him. And then when he was about 14, and then we brought him out here to California when we moved from Philadelphia, and when he was around 14, he got colon cancer, and we had to decide whether to have him have surgery or not, and they said it might extend his life a bit, so we had the surgery, and it extended his life for a few months, but he couldn't control his peeing or pooing for the most part. And he was like, and it was cold and rainy that winter here. And so we didn't have the heart to put him outside. And so he was kind of pooing on the carpets and peeing on them. And so I was in a Long's drugstore, and I saw they were renting these carpet cleaners, these huge things, and $12 or $15 you could rent them for 24 hours. So I said, that's what I need. So I'll rent it and take it home and shampoo the carpets. And so I put it in the back of my car. I had a little sports car type of thing. It didn't have a real rear seat, but there was a little area there, so I put it behind.
What was it, an MG?
No, it was a BMW Z3. I had one for 17 years. And finally got rid of it and it was falling apart. And I got a Toyota Prius that I have now, which is a wonderful, wonderful car. But at any rate, I put it behind the driver's compartment, and I think the top was down, but I couldn't see behind me. And so I pulled up to this stop sign, and I was trying to adjust the side mirrors so to see if I could be able to see behind me, because it seemed dangerous. And then I heard these fellows shouting obscenities and screaming at me, and then I looked and turned around, and I saw, these big Jeep-type cars with huge wheels.
Like a Hummer or something?
Yeah, something like that, and gun turrets on the top, real, redneck type of thing. And I saw these two teenage guys in there, and they were like flipping birds and shouting at me, like, get out of our way, you old fart, type of thing. And so I pulled the car across and over to the edge of the road, and they went roaring past, shouting obscenities. They threw a beer can at my car, flipping birds and that type of thing. So then I had to follow them because it was a one lane road. It was El Monte coming up toward Foothill.
Oh, it was up here in California. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was just following them, and then when it comes to this stoplight, it divides into 2 lanes suddenly.
Yeah.
So I pulled up right to the right of them. Yeah. And this fellow's leaning out, kind of like, you're going to challenge us, you old fart type of thing, like a real hostile, mean look on his face. And I looked up to him and I said, hey, listen, guys, I really kind of owe you an apology. Here's the scoop. I have this carpet cleaner that I just rented at the drugstore, so I didn't know you guys were behind me. I have this dog that I just love, and he's dying of colon cancer, and so I got the carpet cleaner so we wouldn't have to put him out in the rain, so I could clean up, because he's been pooing and peeing on the carpets. But I didn't intend to hang you guys up, and I'm really sorry. And he looked at me, and his jaw dropped open, and he says, I have a dog too. Hey, do you want us to come home with you? We'll help you clean the carpets. He says, you want a beer? We'll go drink beer together. And I says, no, I was young once, and I used to have a motorcycle, and I would get tickets for speeding, and I used to drink beer and get drunk and drive my motorcycle doing crazy things, and it was fun. And you guys are young now. I'm old. You guys have your fun, and have a fantastic day. And they said, okay, thank you, and off they went. But
so this is another example of you really unveiling your own humanity to them.
Yeah.
As opposed to protecting it.
Yeah. And going into this I-it thing. You see, most people would say, well, they're aggressive, and you stick up for them or get them punished or go into some kind of battle with them, and there you're just accepting the invitation to do battle. You're putting the power in the hands of the other person.
So it's interesting because this sounds slightly modified 5 sequence, because you begin by sort of justifying yourself. You explain why, you did what you did.
Yes, but not in a defensive way.
Right.
In the way that's what happened to me, but it put you guys out, and I really apologize for that. And with a slight change, it could be defensive and irritate them.
Yeah. So a lot of it is in the tone, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's in the tone and what your goal is, too, and how you're feeling about yourself. And if you're feeling threatened and feeling like you've got to fight back, for your pride is in the way, then you'll get into this kind of battle. I have one more. I don't know if we have time for one more.
We do. I have one more question on this example.
But it's a choice. You have a choice, and even says that, I think, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, like you can go toward the light or you can go toward the dark. I can't remember the passage.
I don't know.
We have this choice at every moment of how we're going to live our life, how we're going to interact with other people.
So you also said, I'm sorry. And when we've talked about the 5 secrets in the past, saying I'm sorry is often a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. And I posted on that recently. You see, if you say I'm sorry as a way of changing the topic, it's no good. Like if you say, I'm sorry, let's move past this now, then you're not giving them a chance to talk. But if you say to someone, I'm really sorry that I hurt your feelings, and it sounds like you're feeling pretty angry with me, and I want to hear, what's going on, because I feel like I really did let you down there, and I feel kind of ashamed and badly about it too. Then you're encouraging conversation about feelings and a deep connection. But when most people say I'm sorry, they're saying it so as to blow the other person away.
So you want to avoid that.
That could be a whole podcast too, because people might not really comprehend what we just said. But that's so common to use I'm sorry in a dysfunctional way.
It's like, I'm sorry, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's shut up now.
Yeah, exactly.
And therapists do that to patients too, often. Like, the patient might say, "Oh, Dr. Burns, I'm angry because you took that emergency call last session. And this is my time. I'm paying for it." And then the therapist might say, "Well, I'm sorry that happened. I'll ask the secretary to hold the calls in the future." What would be wrong with that response, Fabrice?
Well,
why is that not effective?
It's trying to fix it. It's like, let's make this go away. I mean, it may have been said with a genuinely concerned tone, but it's like, I don't want to hear the complaint anymore.
That's right. I don't want to hear your anger.
Yeah, I don't want to hear your anger.
It's just a subtle way of shutting the person down. Whereas if you say, "Gee, I'm really sorry that happened, and you're right. This is your time, and you have every right to feel ignored. I took that call. It was from a suicidal patient. It was a life and death emergency, but that's no excuse. You deserve the time, and I feel terrible that I did that to you because you say everyone you've ever loved has ignored you ever since you were a little boy. And
right.
Let's talk about what that was like for you, how hurt and lonely and angry and discouraged you felt, and then that opens up.
You invite the person to talk about this. So I'd love to hear your next
story.
Example.
A woman came to me for therapy in Philadelphia. She was a brilliant research chemist, and she worked in this laboratory. And the problem that she had was, she said her boss was sometimes like a saint and sometimes like the devil. And he would go like a month at a time in each persona, and when he was in his positive moods, he would be encouraging people, real kind and warm and a good leader. But then he'd go 4, 5, 6 weeks into this hostile zone where he would put people down. He was mean and using his power just to make people miserable. And she wanted to know, how do you handle like a hostile, irrational, angry, growling boss? Now, I knew she raised dogs and loved dogs as her kind of one of her hobbies, and so I said to her, "Do you know how to deal with an angry dog?" And she says, "Oh yeah, that's simple." And I said, "Well, what do you do if a strange dog comes up to you and starts growling? It's not your fault that dog is treating you like that, but it is your accountability. How are you going to respond? How would you respond?" She said, "Oh, that's easy." She said, "I do that all the time with strange dogs. You just get real motionless and quiet. And then you start saying what a handsome dog he is and how special he is. And you kind of hold your hand out, and then they trust you and they start licking you. And she said, that's how you do it." And I said, "Well, that's how you handle an angry boss too. You just treat him like a dog." She started laughing, and she kind of saw what I meant. And then we practiced how to use the 5 secrets of effective communication when her boss is hostile to her. And we did role playing, and so I was curious to see what would happen. She came back the next week, and she was just delighted. And she said the next day after the session, she went in. She had a meeting scheduled with her boss, and she had written this paper about her research. And she had given it to him to review and, comment on and make suggestions how to improve it before she submitted it for publication. It was something she'd been working on for some time and was quite excited about the findings. So she sat down with her boss and asked him what he thought about the paper, and he said, I skimmed through it. It was clearly a piece of crap, and I threw it in the wastebasket. And then she remembered the 5 secrets: disarming technique, stroking, feeling empathy, this type of thing. And she said, oh, yeah, she said, we're kind of on the same page there. When I was writing it, I was telling myself this is kind of a piece of crap too, particularly because I've read so many of your articles and how beautifully written they are. And one of my reasons, in fact, my main reason for accepting this job was to have the chance to work with you and to learn from you. And if you would even be willing to tell me 1 or 2 things about it that turned you off, because I know there was a lot of errors, but just 1 or 2, that would give me, something to start working on, revising it. And he said, oh, I didn't know you felt that way. Let me take a look at it here. And she said, well, he started going through it. He said, actually, this is a pretty damn good paper, and you could do this and this, and you'd have something pretty special here. He said, I'd even be honored to be the second author, the co-author.
Yeah.
And she said, that sounds fantastic. So she took it and revised the paper, submitted it for publication, and it won a worldwide competition. It absolutely made her career. But she said that after that day, her boss was just like sunshine, he was her greatest fan after that.
Yeah.
It's the same phenomenon of we can't blame her for her boss's bad behavior, but she decided to be accountable in terms of her own behavior. And when you think of a guy like
we can always choose our response. Huh? We can always choose our response.
Exactly. Exactly. And you think about that guy, he was probably a real lonely, frustrated guy. He one can only speculate, but he's probably got a lousy relationship with his wife, because he probably treats her this way.
Probably, yes.
And he's got a lousy relationship with all of these people. He's kind of world famous and feeling pissed off at everybody, and everyone's pissed off at him. Yeah. And then when she suddenly, instead of accepting his invitation to do battle or to be a victim or whatever, and gave him respect, gave him stroking, gave him warmth, disarmed him, found truth in what he was saying, he was just eating out of her hand. And so I've often said that violent, abusive people are actually the easiest to relate to. But the goal, and I hate to say this in a way, but is to manipulate them sometimes. It's not to develop some deep form of empathy or intimacy, because the person may not be capable of it. Maybe they're taking amphetamines and murdering people and a really violent, bad guy. But if you show them respect and warmth, in most cases, there's no 100% cure in life, but 90% of the time they'll be eating out of your hand. And one last thing I want to say is another fellow came to my relationship workshop, and he also came back a year later, and he worked exclusively with gang members in Los Angeles, and again, the Bloods, the Crips, these Mexican cartel.
Pretty tough people, yeah.
Yeah, and he said he used the 5 secrets with them. He said he never had any problem with any of them, that he was the only person who could form these connections instantly with any of these gang members.
Yeah. Well, those are quite amazing examples, and they kind of cover the range of where you can go with this. And I hear it in the sense where you may not be wanting to form a strong bond with that person or even get closer to them.
Or you may.
Well, you may, but even if you don't, you can still treat them as a human being.
Yes, with dignity.
And have them see you as a human being.
Right.
engaging them on the equal level of humanity.
Yeah. You know Dietrich Bonhoeffer?
No.
He was a Lutheran minister. I just remembered this because my dad was a Lutheran minister, and he was imprisoned by the Nazis in World War II because he would not buy into the Nazi doctrine.
Yeah.
And he treated his Nazi imprisoners with respect. They took him out several times and said, "If you don't endorse Nazism, we're going to shoot you now." They put the blindfolds on, but then they would have like fake guns because they didn't want to kill him for fear of making a martyr out of him, at least for a while.
Yeah.
And so he'd have all kinds of abusive treatment. But like he said, when they would put the shackles on him, which were painful, he would say thank you, and then they'd get irritated and say, why are you thanking us? And he would say things, well, because you're doing what you think is the right thing, and I respect that. I don't agree with what you're doing, and I don't agree with the goals of Nazism, but I respect you as a human being. And again, it was such an unusual strategy, and the guards liked him and befriended him, and they smuggled him papers and writing things so that he could make notes and journals. Yeah. And they smuggled them out of prison for him. And they were subsequently published as a series of short books. I think one was called Letters and Papers from Prison, and another one was called Prisoner for God. And sadly, they eventually did assassinate him. They did kill him.
Yeah,
but
didn't last forever. Huh?
Yeah, but it was again another example of exactly the same thing. So we sometimes have more choices and power than we realize.
Well, I hope this answers Rosie's question, because this is certainly a concern that some people may have in terms of blaming the victim and.
Yeah,
and it's true that
we don't want to blame the victim; we want to empower the victim.
Empower, exactly. That's really the reframing that we're doing here.
I've got one more quickie. Can I do it? I had this nun, Sister Sheila Flynn, who used to work in my clinic in Philadelphia. She was a beautiful person, and she was from some area of the nunnery or whatever where they work in the world, and she wanted to work as a therapist, so she wanted to get psychotherapy training in my clinic. And she said that one of her the nuns that she lived with there in the monastery or whatever it's called was getting off a bus, and some young thug came up and stuck a knife up against her and said, give me your money or I'm going to kill you. And she said, oh, this is really bad news because I only have $2.38 right now, and you probably need more than that. And if you'd be willing to come back to the monastery, we have a fund there for people in need, and you could even eat dinner with us, and we might pray together or whatever. And she said, I want to give you more than $2.38. And he couldn't believe it, so he put his knife away and went back with them, and they ate together and prayed together.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far. All right, well, thank you, David. That was a nice way to close. I'll see you at the next podcast.
Okay, thanks.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.